While visiting my in-laws who live far away, my mother-in-law came to pick us up at the station in her car. My husband Phil got into the passenger seat first, and as I tried to open the backseat door, I realized it was locked. Mother, the door seems to be locked. As I said that to them through the car window, my mother-in-law and Phil looked at each other and started laughing. With a smile, my mother-in-law said, "Why should I let an incompetent woman who can't even do proper wife duties into the car?" What? What do you mean? I never liked you from the start. You wear your career woman attitude on your face and don't support Phil at all. Hey, open the door, I demanded, but the door remained firmly locked. Then, Phil in the passenger seat said mockingly, "This should make you rethink things a little. Walk 3 hours back home." At that moment, I couldn't take it anymore. What kind of parent-child pair is this? I won't follow you anymore. I don't care what happens. Fine, I replied, squeezing out my words. My mother-in-law and Phil laughed loudly, rolled up the windows, and drove off. An hour later, Phil called me repeatedly. "I'm Katie Simpson, 31 years old, and a working wife. I'm good at Spanish and work for a foreign company. My workplace is vibrant, and I spent my 20s devoted to my job. But soon I realized my 30s were approaching and felt a bit anxious about not having a boyfriend. Even so, I was hesitant to apply to a marriage agency. Instead, my daily routine was to visit my favorite bar after work to relax and think things over. One day, the bar owner approached me. "What's wrong, Katie? You don't seem well." Maybe it's time I start thinking about marriage, but I can't find a partner." "I see. I know it's strange to suggest this to a customer, but how about me?" he proposed. "What?" This bar owner was Phil, who later became my husband. He was 5 years older than me and in his second year of running the bar. At first, we were just owner and customer, but after a few dates, I was drawn to Phil's charm. Since he listened to my work stories, I felt he understood my career and was reassured. Even during busy times, Phil always cared for me. A year into our relationship, he proposed to me, and I happily accepted. After that, my parents approved of the marriage, and we visited Phil's family. His family lives in the suburbs, a 3-hour walk from the nearest station. We headed to his parents' apartment in a rented car. Phil's father had already passed away, and his mother lived alone in the apartment. Suppressing my nerves, I greeted his mother, Diane, respectfully. "Nice to meet you. I'm Katie Simpson. I'm dating Phil," I said. But she stared at me and told Phil, "Phil, are you really marrying her? I thought you'd bring home someone cuter. She looks like she's got a cheeky face," she pointed out. I was shocked by her words. "And if you become his wife, can you help Phil with his work? He's always busy." "You're quitting your job, right?" she questioned. I hurriedly explained that I intended to continue working at my foreign company and had no plans to quit. "You think you can be a wife like that? I don't care if you work for a foreign company, but you're just cheeky." "Phil, don't marry this woman," she criticized. I looked at Phil for help, but he said, Hey, Mom. Katie's salary is high. It's fine if she keeps working, right? Good income, huh? Well, if that's the case, I guess it can't be helped." Phil's words seemed to soften his mother, but I was still hurting. "Even if you get married, don't slack off at work," she warned, and I felt troubled by her advice. Though she approved of our marriage, her words made me anxious. But with our home and her place being 4 hours apart, believing we'd have little contact with his strict mother, I decided to marry Phil. Afterward, we rented a 3-room apartment near Phil's bar and began our newlywed life. However, Phil didn't help with any housework. He would come home after I had fallen into a deep sleep and sleep until noon. Even if I asked him to do some housework before leaving for work, he didn't help at all. "Phil, you didn't do any chores again today. You used to live alone, so you should be able to handle basic housework." "Shut up. Now that we're married, housework is the wife's job, right?" Mom said the same thing. "Don't neglect your wife duties." "But you know how busy my job is, right? You think working for a foreign company makes you look cool? You can't control me just because you have a better job and education." Phil's words seemed to reveal his frustration about my higher educational background and career status. Where did the man who understood my career before marriage disappear to? With my head in my hands, I had no choice but to shoulder all the housework. A few months after our marriage, I came home to a shocking sight. My mother-in-law had shown up and announced, "Mother, is something wrong?" "What? Didn't Phil tell you? I'll be staying here for the next 3 months to assess how well you do as a wife." "What? Phil, what is this about?" I looked at Phil, but he casually replied, did I forgot to mention it?" And so, living with my mother-in-law began, starting a painful chapter in my life. Every morning, Only I would be woken up early to do housework under her watchful eye. Fish for dinner? Are you treating me like an old lady? Even when I prepared dinner, she would criticize it daily. Sometimes, she would even throw away the food I'd put so much effort into making. After working late, I'd return home to find my mother-in-law blocking the entrance. What are you trying to prove by coming home this late? Don't forget my son is the one making the money. Because of this, I had to listen to her constant nagging. While she treated me like a servant, she often asked me for money. Katie, I want to see a musical show. Could you give me the ticket money? That's quite a sudden request. Come on, I'm in the big city, so you should let me have a little fun. Why are you being so stingy? At times like this, Phil would chime in, come on, it's not a big deal. Just give her some money. At my wit's end, I argued back, there's no way I can give you that kind of money. This is too much. It seemed this was the first time she'd been opposed, and though she tried to say something back, I ignored her and locked myself in my room. In the end, Phil reluctantly gave her the money. She took it and left without hesitation. As time passed, the amount of money she asked for kept increasing. Naturally, we're covering all the household expenses. She'd ask for money when it suited her, was always sarcastic, and made a mess of the house. Unable to tolerate the situation any longer, I brought it up with Phil one day. Phil, the way your mom treats me is just too much. You need to take action as my husband. But Phil, visibly angry, said, what are you talking about? Are you planning to criticize my mom? No, that's not what You think you're superior to me and mom just because you earn more, don't you? I can see right through you. What are you even saying? I don't understand. While I was confused, Phil calmly said, Mom isn't wrong about anything. You're a bad wife, so she's training you. If you continue to criticize her, I'll take measures. What do you mean by measures? At that moment, Phil took out a divorce form, already filled out, and slammed it on the table. Phil, what's this? If you don't comply, I'll divorce you. A woman as unappealing as you will be left alone once you're not with me. And who's the one nobody wants around? You're ridiculous. When I counted, Phil was lost for words and left the room with a snort. I no longer felt any love for Phil. I couldn't forgive his behavior. But simple revenge wouldn't mean much. So I decided to wait for the right opportunity. After the promised 3 months, his mother finally left. Still, my relationship with Phil remained strained. He continued to refuse to help with the housework and only spoke to me harshly. I gradually grew to dislike speaking to Phil altogether. Time passed, and as the Christmas approached, Phil decided on his own, we're going to my parents' place for Christmas this year. Since we were married, I had no choice but to comply, so I reluctantly agreed. On the day of the trip, we took the train. While visiting the in-laws who live far away, my mother-in-law came to pick us up at the station in her car. Phil got into the passenger seat first, and as I tried to open the backseat door, I realized it was locked. Mother, the door seems to be locked. As I said that to them through the car window, my mother-in-law and Phil looked at each other and started laughing. Why should I let an incompetent woman who can't even do proper wife duties into the car? What do you mean? I never liked you from the start. You wear your career woman attitude on your face and don't support Phil at all. Hey, open the door, I demanded, but the door remained firmly locked. Then, Phil in the passenger seat said mockingly, this should make you rethink things a little. Walk 3 hours back home. At that moment, I couldn't take it anymore. What kind of parent-child pair is this? I won't follow you anymore. I don't care what happens. Fine, I replied, squeezing out my words. My mother-in-law and Phil laughed loudly, rolled up the windows, and drove off. I just silently watched their car drive away. Well then, let's head back, I murmured to myself. And I returned to the station instead of going back to her place. I'd never go back there again. No matter how angry my mother-in-law and Phil would get, I didn't care anymore. I managed to find an open seat on the train and quickly left the area. An hour had passed since I had separated from my husband. Then, my phone started ringing. The caller was Phil. I ignored it and put my phone in my coat pocket. The calls kept coming, almost like a relentless pursuit. Unable to bear it any longer, I stepped out onto the train deck and answered the call. Hello, I said. You finally picked up. Where are you? Phil asked in a panicked voice. Keeping my composure, I asked, what's with all the calls? What's going on? So, after that, we decided to go for a drive and head back home, and I took Mom to a tourist spot. On the way, we had an accident, he replied. An accident? What do you mean? We both got minor injuries. But the other party is a foreigner, really angry, and we can't communicate. You're good at Spanish, so could you come to mediate? Phil asked frantically. I see. Are you really listening? The other car looks very expensive, and the driver is yelling in Spanish. Hurry up and come here. Where are you walking right now? Phil said. I'm not walking, I replied. What? Actually, I'm on the train right now. We're about to enter a tunnel, so the signal might cut off. What the hell? Are you kidding me? Are you heading back home? Phil shouted, but I hung up immediately. Even though the tunnel was a lie, I smiled coolly. After returning home and packing my belongings, I quickly moved into a short-stay rental apartment. Once that was done, I headed to a certain place. After the Christmas holiday ended and the first working day of the year arrived, I left the office to find my mother-in-law with crutches and Phil with a neck brace, waiting for me. What are you two doing? I asked with a scowl, and both turned red in the face. There's no one at home, and you're not answering your phone. What on earth have you been doing? Unforgivable. They yelled, so to avoid causing a scene, I led them to a nearby cafe. Why did you not come last time? And you call yourself a wife? My mother-in-law began to shout, but I ordered coffee and chose to ignore her. Phil couldn't hide his anger and said, because you didn't come back. We had all sorts of trouble afterward. The police came, and in the end, we had to speak directly to the other party. They're foreigners, and not being able to communicate was a problem. Really? I replied. I'll overlook your attitude. So just go and talk to them quickly. They're calling again. With a pushy attitude, Phil handed me the phone. Reluctantly, I answered the call, had a brief conversation with the other party, and ended the call. Phil asked me, so, what did they say? I calmly responded, they were really angry. Apparently, your mother ignored a red light and crashed into the other car. And the other party is a famous international celebrity, demanding compensation for medical expenses and the totaled car. That car is worth $300,000. What? Phil and his mother exclaimed in shock, their voices echoing in the room. They seemed speechless, unable to hide their surprise at the information. Well, can't you handle it with insurance? I lightly suggested, but my mother-in-law's face darkened immediately. Actually, we don't have insurance. I thought it was a waste of money, she muttered. Oh my, I said with a bitter smile, sensing the atmosphere change. Phil showed his anger toward me and said, what's with that attitude? That's not how a wife should act. Quickly talk to them and make sure there are no additional costs. If it goes to court, you'll be our interpreter. Then, my mother-in-law chimed in. Yes, you're rich, so you should help out with this. It's only natural as a wife. I calmly responded, I'm not a wife anymore. What? Phil looked surprised, but I proceeded to explain the facts matter-of-factly. When Phil presented the divorce form to pressure me, my heart had already gone cold. I swiftly went to the courthouse and filed the divorce papers. I had kept the form Phil had used for leverage in case anything happened. What, you? How could you do this on your own? Phil exclaimed in shock. How disrespectful. His mother accused. Both of them criticized me simultaneously, but I stood my ground and confidently rebutted, I have nothing to do with you anymore. We're just strangers now. You can suffer paying the $300,000 or whatever. You horrible people. I walked away, leaving them fuming with anger. As for what happened afterward, I heard that both eventually made a full recovery from their injuries. Apparently, they weren't that seriously injured in the first place. My former mother-in-law's car was broken beyond repair due to the accident, and the famous foreign celebrity demanded an unimaginable amount in compensation. Phil's bar was never particularly successful, and his income alone was insufficient to support their household. With Phil's low income and his mother living unemployed in an apartment, they had no way to come up with the necessary funds and eventually had to go into debt. Phil moved back to his parents' home, and the two now lived together in a shabby apartment, working hard to repay their debt. Even after hearing these stories, I don't feel any sympathy for them. On the contrary, I even feel a sense of relief. Several years have passed since the divorce, and I've been living alone, focusing on my work. As a result, my stress has decreased and my performance at work has improved, leading to a promotion. Recently, a sincere and reliable man I met through work formally asked to date me with marriage in mind. I intend to accept his proposal. From now on, I'll put myself first and pursue true happiness. That's it. You've been using the $500 I sent for living expenses for fun, haven't you? Jason shouted loudly as he returned home. Could he be lying even more, not satisfied with just exploiting me? As I heard his voice, anger also welled up in my heart. Jason was a problem. He surely had no intention of listening to me. My love for Jason, who ignored my words and said things as he pleased, cooled rapidly. Do you have any intention of listening to me? I don't want to hear your excuses. Either return the money you spent immediately, or divorce. What? Then it's divorce. I answered with a smile. Right after that, the front door opened. It seemed my son Kevin had come home. It's wrong to blame Mom. What? Are you defending this woman? She has. That's exactly why you both lost my trust. Seeing the person who appeared behind Kevin, we were surprised. Thanks to his support, I was able to divorce Jason. And by stopping the remittances, they will be put in a difficult situation. I, Tracy Manning, 37 years old, am a normal part-time office worker and a mother with a son, Kevin, who is in the midst of his rebellious phase. Kevin, ever since he was young, liked his studies and would voluntarily do his homework and prepare for lessons without my prompting. As he entered his rebellious phase, he gradually began to ignore me. However, he never used harsh words or violence. When he became a high school student, I felt this was normal. More difficult than my son were my husband Jason and my mother-in-law Diane. I met Jason in college, and we started dating due to his proactive approach. After graduating, Kevin was born and we got married. How rude to have a shotgun wedding, my mother-in-law criticized. She loved Jason very much and probably thought I took him away. I endured her mistreatment. Sometimes it even endangered my pregnancy. At such times, my father-in-law Michael would save us, saying, "What are you doing?" My father-in-law is strict but kind-hearted, a benefactor who has supported us many times. I keep in touch with my father-in-law, but I keep my distance from my mother-in-law. Honestly, I don't want to get involved with her. Then one day, I got an unpleasant call from my mother-in-law. Hey, could you increase the remittance a bit? Actually, we were financially supporting her. Once, Jason suggested we live together. However, citing unresolved issues from the past mistreatment and Kevin's examination period, I refused. Then, Jason and his mother strongly criticized me. Not wanting to live together is inappropriate for a wife. My mother-in-law said, always dwelling on the past. Jason also said, wait, does living together mean I have to change my desired school? Kevin changed the situation with those words. Kevin, as the heir, was pampered by my mother-in-law. If I don't go to that school, my future will be jeopardized. Do you intend to hinder my dreams? If so, I'll never forgive you. Because of Kevin's words, my mother-in-law had nothing to say. Jason also silently looked at his mother. It was also helpful that my father-in-law was on our side. If you don't value your family, you might lose your job, he warned Jason. My father-in-law runs a company where I work part-time. Jason is the nominal successor, but his lack of work skills is well known. Even I, a part-timer, hear about Jason's incompetence. It's that famous. I think his current position is due to my father-in-law's mercy. Understanding this, Jason stopped mentioning living together. Given this background, we decided to provide financial support instead of living together. I don't feel the need to provide support, but please let me at least do this for my parents, begged Jason, so I accepted it. Jason is lazy, so in reality, I am the one sending the $500 he gave me directly to my mother-in-law. I think there's no need for financial support with your husband's income, but it's for my husband. Just send it quickly without complaints. My mother-in-law insisted over the phone. Arguing would only make my mother-in-law angrier. Until now, Kevin and my father-in-law have been supportive. But now Kevin is in adolescence, and my father-in-law is busy with an important project. It's hard to ask for help. Despite this, my mother-in-law's persistent demands for more money continued, so I decided to add another $300 from my part-time income. Just $300? Well, okay. I've increased the amount, so please don't make unnecessary contact anymore. I firmly warned my cheerful mother-in-law. Keeping distance from my mother-in-law was best, but I couldn't forget my father-in-law's kindness. I plan to endure until Kevin becomes independent. I'm back. Welcome back. After that, I planned to talk to Jason, who had just returned home, about the increased financial support. But Jason avoided even looking at me. Irritated by him, I still tried to have an important conversation. I want to talk a little. Enough, I'm tired. I'm going to take a bath, he said and headed straight to the bath. Picking up the socks and tie Jason left strewn about, I sighed. What's wrong? A voice came from behind, and I turned around in surprise to see Kevin, also looking surprised. That startled me. Kevin. It's been a while since he spoke to me, so I was surprised. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to startle you. It's okay. Did something happen? We talked for the first time in a long time. I was so happy, I ended up telling him everything. Being ignored by your own husband is indeed painful. Meanwhile, Kevin listened to my story, seemingly deep in thought. Maybe grandma. Hey, I'm done with the bath. Time for dinner. While Kevin was about to say something, Jason returned to the living room. So, Kevin stopped speaking and went back to his room. Feeling like I missed a precious moment with my child, I served dinner to Jason. Hey, I have something I want to talk about. Even while eating. What? Fish? Not meat. The moment I tried to start a conversation, Jason complained about the meal. You said you wanted fish today, but more importantly, that was this morning, right? Now I feel like eating meat. A wife should sense these things. I don't have ESP. You know, I go shopping after work, right? You should tell me before then. Shut up. You're a failure as a wife. Why did I have to be criticized like this? When I argued back, Jason became more dissatisfied, leading to a marital argument, and I couldn't bring up the topic of financial support. At that time, I didn't realize that Kevin was recording us with his smartphone. Sigh, father-in-law is really a good person. I muttered to myself alone in the living room. To be honest, I had to express it out loud to cope with the stress. My mother-in-law sighed. A younger Jason used to consider my health and help with housework. That's why I decided to marry him. But after Kevin was born, everything changed. While I struggled with Kevin's upbringing, he didn't support me at all, continuously criticizing. Mom would do it this way, mom would be perfect. Thoughts of divorce came and went in my mind. I pondered over the future alone after such events. Around the time Kevin started his summer vacation. During that period, Jason completely ignored me. It was the same behavior as Kevin during his rebellious phase. Is he really a mature adult? There's something important. Come to our parents' house. One day, our family was called to my in-laws' house. It was sudden, and I had work, and Kevin had other plans, so I sent Jason alone. Jason looked a bit displeased, but took a leave and went by himself. Kevin was also getting ready to leave. Kevin, where are you going? Friends. Yeah, that's right. Okay, take care. Don't be too late. So, Kevin and I left the house separately. While at work, I heard that Jason's absence increased work efficiency, and I unconsciously smiled. When I returned home, no one had come back yet, and I started preparing dinner, wondering if I would be criticized that day. Suddenly, hey, Tracy, Jason yelled as he entered through the front door. What happened, Jason? You seem so upset. You've been deceiving me. With doubtful eyes, Jason shouted at me. What? Not understanding his words, I tilted my head and Jason glared at me with anger. Confused, I understood the situation from Jason's next words. We're getting a divorce. You've been playing with the $500 I gave you for living expenses. As soon as he came home, Jason began his angry tirade. Listening to Jason, anger also welled up in my heart. Jason was out of line. Seeing his behavior, he clearly had no intention of listening to me. Jason's attitude of unilaterally throwing words without listening to me rapidly cooled my affection for him. Don't you intend to listen to me? I don't want to hear your excuses. Either return the money you spent immediately or divorce. What? Then divorce it is. I spoke with a gentle smile, and then the front door opened. It seemed Kevin had come home. It's wrong to blame Mom. What? You're defending this woman? She has to. That's exactly why you have lost our trust. We were surprised by the person who appeared behind Kevin. Father, Dad, why are you here with Kevin? There stood my father-in-law, filled with indignation. What are you doing? Explain quickly. When my father-in-law asked in a stern tone, Jason immediately stumbled over his words. My father-in-law gazed at him sternly while Kevin took out his smartphone. I recorded all of Dad's behavior towards Mom, including our recent conversation. This will show everyone that Dad is wrong. What? When Kevin said that, Jason looked utterly shocked. I won't allow you to make Mom the villain, and if you try to hurt her, I'm prepared to take you down, Dad. Kevin is athletic and well-built, while Jason has recently started to develop a belly, a typical middle-aged man. The difference in strength was clear. You're defying your father? What kind of father are you talking about? A father who follows grandmother's every word and ignores Mom's opinions? Even when I ignored her, Mom was always sincere towards me. But what are you doing as a father? Is making Mom suffer your job as a father? Jason remained silent at Kevin's calm words. Children grow up before you know it. Despite this situation, I was sincerely happy that Kevin was protecting me. Jason, remember what I said earlier about what happens to a man who doesn't value his family? My father-in-law said this, and Jason's face turned pale. A natural reaction. It's as if he's saying he's about to fire him. Mom, here. This is a divorce form? What I was handed was a divorce form. Why did Kevin have this? I never expected such preparations. You don't have to worry about me. Encouraged by Kevin's words, I quickly filled in my part and handed it to Jason. Without hesitation, Jason signed the divorce form and then looked at me, surprised. What? Are you sure? Won't you be in trouble if we get divorced? I'll manage. It's easier than living with you. And no more troubles with your mother. But you have no choice but to sign the divorce form. Sign it now. Jason hesitated slightly, but under my father-in-law's stern gaze, he signed the divorce documents, looking dejected. Kevin, pack up. We're going to my parents' house. Got it. After that, we quickly packed our things and headed to my parents' house, sent off by my father-in-law. Jason, who tried to follow us, was glared at by Kevin and my father-in-law, stopping him in his tracks. We decided to stop by the city hall on the way to submit the divorce form. I'm truly glad Kevin and my father-in-law came back together. They made it possible for me to divorce Jason smoothly. What about the financial support? Of course, I'm stopping it. Stopping the financial support would definitely change their situation. Upon arriving at my parents' house, they welcomed us warmly, despite the sudden visit. After ensuring we were okay, my father-in-law went home. Hey Kevin, why were you with grandfather? Choosing a calm moment, I asked Kevin. Actually, I had a meeting planned with Grandpa today. It turned out his plan for the day was to talk with my father-in-law. Kevin had told my father-in-law about the financial support and Jason's daily behavior after hearing about it from me. They had made plans to meet to discuss future strategies. It turned out that my father-in-law didn't know the details of the financial support. Come to think of it, my father-in-law was absent when the financial support was decided. The topic of financial support came up after my father-in-law had left the room. The subsequent arrangements were made over the phone with my mother-in-law. I would tell my husband, and my husband understands, she said, but maybe that was a mistake. And when Kevin told my father-in-law about the situation, he seemed to be trembling with anger. Diane should have sufficient funds from me. What is she spending the money on? As a result, my father-in-law apparently conducted an investigation into my mother-in-law's activities. What became clear was my mother-in-law's wasteful spending habits. She had been using the financial support we sent for extensive shopping. During my mother-in-law's absence, a search of the storage revealed countless branded items and luxury jewelry. Moreover, it seemed she had been giving lavish gifts to attractive young men in the neighborhood. The men showed no interest in my mother-in-law, and I wouldn't seriously date a man much older than me either. The rejected gifts were left unopened in the storage because she couldn't deal with them, and my father-in-law disposed of them. Grandpa is divorcing Grandma. He was furious about her irresponsibility. I can imagine. My father-in-law decided to divorce my mother-in-law, and after seeing Jason's actions on Kevin's phone, he was further enraged. He returned with Kevin to encourage me to divorce Jason too, after deciding to get divorced himself. They encountered the scene of me being criticized and immediately urged for the divorce papers to be signed after hearing me declare I wanted a divorce. That's why everything was so prepared. Exactly. This is from Grandpa. Kevin handed me a brochure about a property. The property was of moderate size, located midway between the school and my workplace. It seemed a bit far from my in-laws' house. What does this mean? I asked. Grandpa wants to offer us this house as an apology for the recent situation, Kevin explained. I was wide-eyed with surprise. While I would have to drive from my parents' house, I could commute using regular routes from this new house. Grandpa said he doesn't want us to hesitate. It seems he'd be happier if we accepted the house. I see. I need to thank him later. I was impressed by such generosity, typical of a CEO. I gratefully accepted the house offered by my father-in-law. Eventually, Jason lost his job, not only because of this incident, but also because he exposed his incompetence by leveraging his position as the CEO's son and caused various problems. He was pushing off the little work he was assigned, coercing young female employees into relationships, and harassing male employees. During the discussion of these issues, testimonies piled up, resulting in Jason's immediate dismissal. My mother-in-law, divorced by my father-in-law and kicked out of the house, apparently ended up at Jason's place. After the settlement of asset division and child support, Jason's savings were almost depleted, and he was hit with the misfortune of losing his job. Recently, I saw Dad working at a classmate's part-time job, being scolded. Really? Did that classmate say anything special? I asked. Yeah. He said, a man like your dad came in. I told him not to hesitate to be strict if he's not useful. Kevin replied. I see, that's how it is. Being continuously scolded by his son's classmate. What a pitiful situation. He was famous for his incompetence, and as he aged, his prospects for reemployment became even more difficult. On top of that, with my mother-in-law's unreformed spending habits, he is now struggling with debt. I heard from locals that fighting can be heard from their house daily, and recently the police were called due to the disturbance. That incident must have been a significant humiliation for him. Perhaps soon, he might have to leave that house, facing the possibility of being evicted due to mortgage delinquency. On one hand, I made progress in my career. My promotion to a full-time position meant more time and responsibility, but it also came with a corresponding increase in income. Life became a bit more comfortable compared to before, and I no longer had to worry about the monthly financial support. After hearing about Jason's situation, Kevin started showing interest in part-time work. Now, he buys what he wants with his own earnings, freeing us a bit from the strict budget we used to have. His growth and independence are a great relief to me. Unlike my mother-in-law, who had a habit of wasteful spending, we continue to live frugally, eliminating worries about the future. Our family is striving for a stable financial life. My relationship with my father-in-law remains good, and we see each other regularly. One day, my father-in-law made an unexpected proposal to Kevin. If you haven't decided on your future plans yet, how about considering taking over my business after graduation? I'd like you to play a key role in our company, he said. It seems my father-in-law has always considered Kevin as a successor to the company. Maybe employing Jason was part of this plan to spark Kevin's interest. There's no need to rush. If you don't find another dream by the time you graduate from college, I'd like you to consider our business as an option, my father-in-law said, and Kevin took his words seriously. Kevin, you can choose your own path. Don't worry about the favor. I'll solve it through my work, I told him. Thanks, Mom. Actually, I'm still undecided about my future, Kevin replied. He's aiming for a top university's economics department, but his future is still unclear. Then, one day, I received a call from Jason. He was struggling with the mortgage payments and ended up selling the house. I was just astonished by Jason, who left my mother-in-law behind. I understood that Jason was walking the path he chose, but I was still disappointed by his actions. You won't have any more trouble with my mom. Let's start over, Tracy. Kevin needs a real father, Jason said, to which I sharply reacted. What do you have left now? I asked, and he just looked puzzled. Through this exchange, I reconsidered my and my son's future. Our lives aren't dictated by someone else's choices. No matter what path Kevin chooses, I plan to support him fully. While my father-in-law's offer is appreciated, I want Kevin to choose his future on his own terms. I hope his university studies will bring new possibilities to his life and shape his dreams and aspirations. We will continue to move forward step by step, overcoming difficulties. Along with my son's growth, I may have also started a new journey. You have no job, no property, no home. Kevin and I have no feelings left for you. You even abandoned your mother, the only one you had left. What do you have now? Jason was silent to my question. I was honestly disappointed with him for choosing his mother over me and then ultimately abandoning her. The Jason I once loved seems to no longer exist. But if I return to you, Tracy, you no longer have a place with us. I don't want you to contact us ever again. I hung up the phone and set it to block his calls. Later, Jason went to my parents' house, but my father especially had harsh words for him, and my father-in-law took him away. He was then assigned to a construction site far away. Surrounded by burly men at work, it seems unlikely he'll interfere with us again. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, abandoned by Jason, lost her place and was rumored to be seen under a bridge. But that is no longer my concern. I'll be late coming home today because of my part-time job. Okay, thanks for letting me know. That's my line. Thank you, really. Since then, Kevin has emerged from his rebellious phase and engages in proper conversations with me. Through recent events, I've come to understand Kevin's feelings better. To respond to those feelings, I've been expressing my gratitude and apologies directly. Thanks to his response, our parent-child relationship has become closer. Jason's departure, ironically, made us closer as a family. I spent the day with Kevin, thankful for this, and smiling. My relationship with my father-in-law remains unchanged. I may want him as a successor, but I just want to see my dear daughter and grandson, he says, caring for us. My father-in-law was delighted when we recently went on a trip with my parents. I hope to maintain this good relationship with him. Years after the divorce, letters from Jason asking for reconciliation kept coming through my parents. I've been tearing them up without reading. Another letter from him? Looks like it. He still hasn't given up. He should realize that giving up is the real path to happiness. He probably wants to regain something since he has nothing left. Let's hurry and have dinner. Today, Kevin, who has just graduated from college, is going to his first day of work as a successor in the company. He earned the employees' trust during his internship while he was a student. The office staff even mentioned how he's seen as a promising new employee. I'm proud of my son. Actually, I wanted to give this to you, Mom. What is it? He handed me a beautiful box with an elegant pen inside. I bought this with the money I've been saving. I could work hard because of you. I was moved to tears in the morning. I want to continue living peacefully and closely as a family. And I want to be there for Kevin so he can always smile. I'll be careful not to be overbearing like someone we used to know.
Get married already. An ugly, worthless daughter like you should get out as soon as possible. My father hurled these cruel words at me when I was 16. Did I somehow time travel to the past? Unable to argue back, I found myself forced into a marriage with a man I had never met. A loveless, cold marital life began. Inside, only despair spread. Yet, life is unpredictable. I could never have imagined such a turn of events. I am Leona, now 35. I went out to buy Valentine's Day chocolates, but ended up buying chocolates for myself. Then, my husband asked, "What about mine?" I messed up. I had intended to get something for him before entering the store, but I got so caught up in choosing my own chocolates that I completely forgot. Next time, I'll give him a fine wine. Yes, that sounds good. Now, I live a leisurely life in a home filled with love, but staying at home as a child was a painful ordeal. I never felt that way when my sister was little. I have a sister named Alice, who is 2 years younger than me. From infancy, her distinct facial features made everyone excited about her future. Years later, Alice grew into a cute girl that exceeded expectations, and pushed by our mother, she began working as a child model. However, her exposure was limited to brief appearances in local company commercials or side profiles on community event flyers, not exactly a major breakthrough. She was far from being a so-called famous child actor. To my parents, it seemed that any small achievement by my sister was a great source of pride, and they always kept her close like a decorative object, doting on her. At the same time, their interest in me rapidly faded. Perhaps because of a genetic throwback, I had a robust physique much like my grandmother, in stark contrast to my sister, who had a modern look with a small face and long limbs. Furthermore, despite everyone in the family being slim and eating the same meals without any extra snacks, I was the only one with a plump figure. I often wondered, why am I the only one like this? How many times did I envy her appearance, wishing I could look like her? But even as a child, I understood that comparing myself to others was pointless. I am me. I was determined to enhance my strengths, but my parents did not acknowledge my existence. Our first child is a failure in terms of looks and personality. One day, as my parents drunkenly complained about me while drinking in the living room, I accidentally overheard them. Those words stayed in my heart for a long time, making me feel like a failure. My mother, a beautiful lady confident in her looks and maintaining a strong focus on appearance even as she aged, was not just concerned with herself, but also interfered in others' matters. She would scornfully talk about a neighbor who went out to throw away trash early in the morning without makeup, in a t-shirt and sweatpants. This neighbor had quintuplets, and her high-earning husband was hardly ever home. Instead, her mother-in-law often visited, and occasionally there were raised voices. Looking back, I think she must have been enduring harassment. Even as a child, I could see she was always struggling. Is it wrong for someone managing solo parenting and numerous challenges to go out to throw trash in a t-shirt and sweatpants? Surely managing household chores in such circumstances deserves praise. Even as a child, I felt that my mother was unkind and lacked empathy for others. So, while it was painful that she didn't dote on me because she found me unattractive, there was a part of me that understood it. When we were young, my sister started receiving an allowance, but I wasn't given a single dollar. The discrimination became more and more apparent. For example, on days we had soup for dinner, my plate would be piled high with vegetables that my sister didn't like, while her plate was filled with meat. I didn't like those vegetables either. Despite my mother's behavior, my father seemed indifferent, and though my sister must have been aware of the abnormality in our family, it seemed she somewhat enjoyed her advantageous position. There was no one in this house to support me. If my sister broke something, no one would say a word, but if I did the same, I would be strictly scolded and criticized with the excuse that, "You're the older sister." Usually younger siblings might wear hand-me-downs from the older ones, but in our house, it was the reverse. Clothes my sister outgrew or no longer wanted were passed down to me. As a result, I was always dressed in clothes that were too tight with sleeves and hems too short. Being plumper than others and wearing such tight clothes made me look terrible. My chubby body stood out even more, and at school I was laughed at and always felt embarrassed. Even as my mother forced me to wear clothes that didn't fit, she too would adopt a mocking attitude. Everywhere I went, people would say, "Only your sister is cute," and though I was naturally cheerful, I gradually closed off my heart. Even when with friends, thoughts like, "Maybe they don't really want to be friends with me," or They just want to be close to my sister, would cross my mind. Now I understand that I was just being negative, but back then, I was caught up in these paranoid thoughts. My thinking became thoroughly negative, and my relationships grew strained. Although my circle of friends gradually dwindled, rather than feeling sad about it, I chose to be alone. I had grown tired of constantly doubting others' emotions when interacting with them. Being alone meant I didn't have to think about anything. During my gloomy middle school years, as high school entrance approached, I was shocked to find out that my parents had not paid my high school entrance fee. Surprisingly, they had never intended to send me to high school. They preferred to spend the money on Alice for her acting and dance lessons instead. After much persuasion, I finally got a promise from them that they would let me attend if I could pass the entrance exam for a state high school. At that time, Alice's entertainment activities were going well, and my mother burdened me with household chores. Squeezing study time between chores, I managed to pass the entrance exam to a state high school. I thought I could finally relax. As a child, I trusted my parents and felt relieved, only to be completely betrayed. Those people were more like strangers who just happened to give birth to me, devoid of any affection. Pay the entrance fee? Did we forget to do that? Even if you go to high school and study, with your face, you can't lead a decent life, so not being able to go to high school isn't a big deal. Without an apology, my mother casually dismissed it, and my father and Alice burst out laughing upon hearing it. By the time I realized the issue with the entrance fee, the payment deadline had passed, and I had to give up on going to high school. Although I had the option to work part-time and save money to enroll the following year, I had no energy left to do so. It felt like I had burned out. Having believed my parents' words and worked hard, I lost the opportunity to go to high school, and I just didn't care anymore. Even if I had a good education, no one would love me. That was all I could think about, even though education and being loved are completely different issues. In my teenage years, I wondered why I was so prone to such negative feelings, while my parents sarcastically said, "Since you can focus on housework, it's good you're not going to high school." I also started to think, maybe that's fine. I had no motivation to work part-time, and I didn't even feel like leaving my parents' house. Looking back, I think I was on the verge of losing my emotional balance. I spent my days just mechanically following my parents' orders. Then one day, out of the blue, my father said, "Tomorrow you'll be 18, right?" Yes, that's right. I was surprised that my father, who recently showed no interest in me, remembered my birthday. A smile naturally appeared on my face. My birthdays were always ignored, but could it be that this year they might celebrate it? Was it because I had been working hard on the household chores? A small hope began to grow in my heart. And then, get married already? An ugly, worthless daughter like you should get out as soon as possible. What? I was stunned by my father's words, delivered as casually as if he were asking me to go to the convenience store. Shock rendered me speechless, and without even looking at me standing there dumbfounded, he added, "Get your marriage registered tomorrow." Wait a minute. What are you talking about? We want to build connections with someone in the entertainment agency to support Alice's career. Apparently, there's someone looking for a bride for his son. But to register the marriage tomorrow. While drinking together, I casually mentioned that my eldest daughter thinks your son is handsome and things progress smoothly from there. Ha 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 ha. As my father spoke cheerfully, I felt an intense hatred like never before. I hadn't even seen this man's face, and here was my father, happily talking about essentially selling his daughter. Besides, it's unimaginable that the man would marry a woman he's never met. In today's world, such things should be impossible. Everything felt so unreal, or so I thought. Miraculously, it seems the sun actually likes your face. Be grateful. The moment my father said this with a smile, I was at a loss for words. He likes my face. I could hardly believe it. After all, I've always been told my appearance was deficient. To think someone would like such a face. I honestly thought he must be quite unusual. Is he desperate for a woman, or does he think anyone will be okay? Or is he planning to coerce me into something even worse? There must be some reason I can't think of any other explanation. Just as I was about to refuse, my father threatened, "If you don't listen, you can't stay in this house." And I ended up swallowing my words. Then I was more or less forced to sign the marriage registration. Watching this, my sister happily clapped and laughed. I resented my family and my inability to speak up more than ever. Thus, I ended up married to a man who can only be described as someone's son, with no clear idea if he really is anything remarkable. I was taken to a new home prepared by his parents and met him there for the first time. My husband Andy is 10 years older than me and has a reserved demeanor. He's not gloomy, but utterly devoid of vigor. I'm not in a position to talk, not being beautiful myself, but he didn't seem like someone I could have a romance with. Like me, he has a poor relationship with his parents, who said, "We are grateful he's leaving the house," thanking this marriage for taking him off their hands. Ah, so he's in a similar situation after all. Thinking this, a wave of despair washed over me, and I felt empty, as if we were just two burdens being married off to be gotten rid of. With these feelings, our new life together began. For the first month, we exchanged no words other than morning and evening greetings. We ate our meals separately, and I made sure we didn't meet around the house as much as possible. However, one day Andy suddenly started a conversation. "I know you don't like me. Weren't you also forced into this marriage by your parents?" I was indeed, but I hesitated whether to honestly say yes or not. Seeing my hesitation, Andy quickly understood and kindly said, "You don't have to say anything. I saw your photo and really thought you were wonderful. I think there must be some mistake. My sister is far more beautiful than I am. You don't understand yourself." I definitely felt something, and living together has only made that feeling stronger. Maybe it's because we grew up in similar environments. I really like your personality. Seeing Andy speaking so earnestly, I found myself unable to respond. Though his words bewildered me, his expression seemed sincere, not deceitful. Having never even been in love before, I was simply astonished. Is this also love? If it's painful for you to be with me, I don't mind if we get a divorce. I'll leave the divorce papers with you. But first, could we try to be friends rather than spouses? Andy smiled shyly. That smile briefly made my heart flutter, a fact I kept to myself. Confused by the notion of being spouses, his proposal to start as friends relaxed me slightly and allowed me to start seeing our relationship in a more positive light. After that, we began to have meals together. There were no set rules, and though I felt secure with Andy's personality, naturally, it took time to bridge the gap. Gradually, however, our conversations extended beyond mere greetings. As we talked about the weather and discovered each other's preferences, being with my husband gradually became less painful. As a result, we naturally started having meals together and watching TV together more frequently. Surprisingly, we both enjoyed reading, and we found many common interests. Above all, since we both had similar experiences with our parents, we shared many values and found comfort in each other's company. As we lived together, 1 year turned into 2, and by the 4th year, he proposed to me, and we became a true married couple. Is it strange to be proposed to when we are already married? Well, we were always a bit of an unusual couple, so there's no problem there. Having skipped the stages of dating and proposals, we started from scratch together. 10 years into our marriage, without any visits from our parents, we've been living fulfilling days, and even had a child. Just when I feel my life is still full of hope. On TV, there was news of a famous celebrity being arrested. Another celebrity was suspected of involvement in the crime, and it was the talk of the town every day. It was supposed to be someone else's affair for us as a couple. However, among those suspected of involvement, my sister Alice's name surfaced. She had been working as an actress, but I heard she had almost no work recently and was not active in the entertainment industry. She still had ties to her agency, apparently doing occasional work like extras. Despite never having made a name for herself as an actress, she was becoming known as a criminal. Photos of her, cozied up next to a famous actress at a club frequented by dubious men, had been captured. There was no official evidence of her committing a crime, and it seemed she had avoided arrest. However, the situation looked very much like she was involved. The person who leaked this photo was none other than a classmate of hers. This classmate had always disliked my sister, and it seemed that after casually spotting her at a club, they took a photo and sent it to friends claiming, "She's getting involved in shady stuff." It quickly spread from there. Then, someone sold the photo, sparking the current scandal. Even as her sister, all I could muster was a sigh. Huh. I thought it had nothing to do with me anymore. But suddenly, our parents showed up at our house. As soon as I opened the door, my mother, with tears in her voice, clung to me saying, "Leona, help." She looked on the verge of breaking down, and my father was barely keeping her upright. What had happened? My once beautiful mother was emaciated, noticeably thinner, her hair graying and unkempt. "What's going on? You say you need help, but I've already left home a long time ago. We have no one else to turn to but you. Why?" As I struggled to grasp the situation, my father said, "I'll explain." It turned out that my sister had been arrested recently. Being a little-known actress, it hadn't made the news, and I was hearing about it for the first time. As the saying goes, news travels fast. And it seemed her classmates had quickly got hold of this information. Despite not being in the news, the rumors had grown, and now the neighborhood was abuzz with tales of my sister's misdeeds. As a result, my parents were ostracized by the community, their home vandalized with graffiti, stones thrown at it, and they received nuisance calls. "We can't go back home. What has she done? It was a mistake to have her. You're my only child." My mother hugged me and wept. "So, can we live here with you? Let's get along as a family." What convenient timing to say such things. I slowly pulled away from my mother. "Leona, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore." "Don't say that. We've always gotten along well, haven't we?" "That's right." My mother agreed. When I resisted, the two of them were bewildered. It was clear they were trying to appease me. "If you really cared, you wouldn't have let your daughter be married off like that. You might as well have sold me. But you're making it work here, aren't you? It turned out to be for the best, right?" I felt a surge of anger at my father laughing. "Ahaha." And I forcefully pushed him away. "Stop it. How can you say it turned out to be for the best? What if he had been a terrible person? Do you realize what could have happened to me? How can you laugh after doing such a thing? This family is not my family." I raised my voice, hurling my emotions in words. Before I knew it, tears were on the brink of spilling. Glancing to the side, I saw my husband quietly standing by me, gripping my hand tightly. Sometimes it's necessary to forgive others' mistakes. "Leona?" Irritated by my father trying to sound wise and placating me with a cheap smile, I finally said something I had held back for a long time. "Then let me say this. Why don't you rely on each other's lovers? You talk about needing a heart to forgive mistakes. Why don't you show me how it's done?" When I said this, they froze on the spot. Their faces turned pale, and they exchanged glances. Why? Did you think I didn't know?" You both seemed to think it was a secret, but I knew all along. In fact, each of my parents had a lover. Both of them had assumed no one was aware of this fact, but I, and probably Alice too, had known about it. My family's relationships, both parent-child and marital, have long been broken. What part of this is a happy family? Were you cheating while I was still around? My mother screamed, her voice rising, and my father retorted, You too. I watched their intense argument with cold eyes. Isn't forgiving mistakes important? Stop making excuses and just forgive each other already, I said mockingly, laughing through my nose, and they fell silent, unable to respond. Don't drag me into your petty quarrels. This has nothing to do with me anymore, so don't rely on me. The harassment and isolation from the neighborhood, it's all your own doing. Handle it yourselves. I vented years of accumulated anger at them. Then, perhaps admitting they had betrayed each other, they desperately begged me. Please forgive just me. What a pitiful sight. Of course, I rejected their pleas and declared, if you keep pestering me, I'll take this to the proper authorities. Though I blurted out about the proper authorities, I hadn't really thought about where exactly I would go. The police probably wouldn't bother with such matters. Well, maintaining a strong stance is key, haha. Whether my words had an impact was unclear, but they seemed to feel that I was serious as they slumped their shoulders and sat down weakly. Let's go inside. Andy spoke gently, urging me to go back into the house. Prompted by my husband, I entered the house without a word. After a while, I could hear my parents shouting my name from outside, but I ignored their voices. About a month later, I learned that our family home had been set on fire. Whether it was related to Alice's incident was unclear, and no perpetrator had been found, but given the vandalism and harassment the dilapidated house had suffered, some malicious intent was undoubtedly at play. My parents both had affairs, but they never divorced. After the fire, my mother sustained minor burns to her face. Fortunately, her life was not in danger, but the scars remained on her face in an abnormal condition. Whether it was because of this or some other reason, one day my father silently left the house, abandoning her. She believed that he left because of her disfigured face, and she hardly ever left the house afterward. Since they both had affairs, it might have been more about reaching their limit than her appearance. However, the true reason is unknown to anyone. Even though my mother was unaware of the affairs, I believe I understood my father better. In fact, it seems that my father had been borrowing money from lenders and currying favor with powerful people for the sake of my sister Alice. Due to the scandal with Alice, he lost his job and now lives a life hounded by massive debt. Alice, having served 1.5 years in prison, appears to be struggling financially and is rumored to be in dubious videos. I hear she is mentally unstable, but to me, it no longer matters. The phrase "what goes around comes around" really hits the mark. I have decided to observe from afar how their lives will unfold. Meanwhile, I am busy every day surrounded by my 4 children. When the twins were born last, it was truly hectic. My husband and I, having only middle and high school educations, worried whether we could afford to raise 4 children when we found out about the twins. Nevertheless, we both worked hard to obtain qualifications. I work as a medical office assistant, and my husband works as a call center manager in a company that does not discriminate based on nationality or educational background. Studying while taking care of children, especially during pregnancy, was incredibly challenging. I am profoundly grateful for my husband's support during his busy job search and career changes. Though our marriage started under unusual circumstances, having a husband who actively helps with childcare and housework has been incredibly fortunate for me. With these thoughts, I even start to feel a bit of gratitude towards my parents. My husband not only cherishes our children, but he also treasures me like a lover. It's a bit embarrassing, but sometimes we enjoy dates just the 2 of us. We go to the movies or cafes, which might seem like teenage dates, but for us, who never had such moments in our marriage, they hold special meaning. We plan to continue cherishing each other and loving our family. Hoping for another happy day tomorrow, I savor each day as it comes.